Classical Conversations presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Refining Rhetoric School Choice Week wrap-up episode. I'm so thankful that you've tuned in this week. We had 6 amazing episodes, and I'm just recording this on Friday, January 31st in the morning, and I just wanted to reflect on everything that's gone on this week, the executive orders and things coming out of the federal government. Talk a little bit about HSLDA and their tax credit plan that we heard about from Jim Mason. Encourage you on some things that are going well behind the scenes. Talk a little bit about Tennessee and Texas, and what are some next steps that we can all take part of. So, this week, I wanted to say that there's been a tremendous interest in these episodes. Each of them have gotten more listens on the first day than typical episode maybe gets listened to in the first week. And I just want to thank the team here and everyone who's been sharing those episodes with a friend to make sure we get the word out. And I had a comment on my Facebook page earlier. I was like, man, I wish you had done this last year. And I wish I had had this idea last year. I think it would have helped us all a lot more and could have been more impactful for this year's legislative session. But we got them out when we got them out. So just share these with a friend because we can help stop maybe future legislation. If you missed any episodes, I encourage you to watch them all because it's a great perspective from many leading researchers and reporters and thought leaders, all looking at the same issue and coming to a very similar conclusion. Now, the federal government and Donald Trump have released an executive order for the Department of Education, basically suggesting or encouraging them to focus more resources onto school choice states. And he also did some good things like saying, if you have confusion about men and women's bathrooms, that you're not going to get federal funding, or if you have DEI programs, and that he's stopped a lot of grants for review to make sure that they're in compliance with his plans. And so while I applaud him stopping these grants and making sure they're in line with, his view on these things, which, happens to match mine, I'm also just remember a month ago when we had a different president whose views did not align on mine. And if Donald Trump can make an executive order that gives federal funds to states with school choice plans, well, consider the fact that we will probably have a Democrat sometime in the future. They can do the exact same thing to states that do not have them and to punish states that have school choice plans. It could be very easy for them to say, well, state, you are so flush with cash. Why do you need federal funds? You're paying for 2 different education systems at once. And of course, that president would have the right to do that just as much as Trump has the right to move funds around. I'd also like to remind people that we're $36 trillion in debt. We're getting an increase of $1 trillion in debt every single 100 days. At this point, the interest on that debt is astronomical. It could be 25% of our federal budget. And so moving funds around from the federal government to the state makes it look like the state budgets are doing okay, while our federal government drowns in debt. And that's part of the reason that we are $36 trillion or more in debt, and we're likely to see that number continue to rise. And who gets to pay for that debt with the rest of their lives? Well, the kids and my grandchildren, your children and grandchildren will be paying for this debt forever. And so this is not doing anything to minimize or decrease our out-of-control spending. It's just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And so, we need to cut these grants out. But if we see a different president 4 years from now or 8 years from now, they can do the exact same thing to us. And so what we really want is to get the federal government out of funding and out of all education choices because they have no God-given responsibility for that. Think about that. They collect all this money, they steal it from your pockets, they have no God-given authority to do so. Then they attach all these strings like Every Child Succeeds Act or No Child Left Behind or Common Core. They're all terrible. They're all written by globalists. The educational outcomes continue to decline. Our cost to service the schools continue to increase because they keep on adding more and more administrative burden. So we are not seeing this move in a direction. I know Linda McMahon has been tasked by Donald Trump with closing the Department of Education. Well, it's not good enough just to close the Department of Education. We have to rescind these laws. We have to make sure the federal government has very limited or no laws at all about the education in our country. Otherwise, we'll just have these funds go into different departments, Department of Labor or, some other one in the federal government. They'll still have all of these grants. We'll still be getting trillions of dollars in debt, and we'll still be reliant on government funding. I think you've probably seen the outrage this week when Donald Trump had this grant freeze and how much people got in arms. And you might have been surprised to find out that some of your favorite charities get the most of their money from the federal government. Catholic charities oftentimes are almost 100% funded by the federal government, and they're using that money to move illegal immigrants from foreign countries here, providing them backpacks and food and water while they're in other countries walking towards our southern border. And this is what our federal government has done with our taxpayers' money. So what do we need to do? We need to get the government out of it, not just the strings, but the funding in general. So why was it so important that Donald Trump fund these school choice states? Because school choice costs a ton of money because these governments are funding two systems at once. The Tennessee bill, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, is actually fully funding the public school system and the students that get out. How ludicrous is that? Well, because states like Arizona have seen their budget rise so much in order to, fund these programs, they're going to be having to raise taxes. They're going to have to raise property taxes. They're going to have to raise all sorts of taxes to fund this. But they can get around that if they start getting additional grants from the federal government. So our country will get more in debt. The federal government will retain its power. And these private schools will now become dependent on federal dollars in order to remain open because that's what these programs are going to be dependent on going forward. So it is a complete boondoggle. These are vendor bills. It is absolutely ridiculous. Now, in the House and Senate, they have bills for a $10,000, I believe, tax credit program, which basically expands the 529 plan to pay for educational expenses beyond just private schools or college. And so, let me say what the good thing is about this plan from the federal government, and then we'll break down why I really don't think it's something I plan on participating in and why it's just, again, something that's really action with no beneficial outcomes. So let's talk about how 529 plans, why they got started in the first place. And the 529 plan originally was to pay for college. And so, if you invest money into a 529 plan, say when the kid starts when he's 4 and you just invest, a little bit every single year, well, because of, the money increasing over value over time, it's invested in the stock market, that money can grow and grow and grow. And, if $1,000 is invested when they're 4, well, suddenly that's, $4,000 or $6,000 of value or worth when they get to college age. And so that was kind of the idea of the 529 plan. And the 529 plan over the years has actually become looser with its standards, which is one of the few government programs that maybe has done that. For better or worse. But originally it was very focused on college costs. Then they made it available for private education for private schools, but excluded homeschoolers. And now I think they're just trying to make it for all private education, including homeschoolers. So how does a 529, how does this really work? And so like someone like me, who's, pretty well off, we could put say $10,000 into a 529 plan, and that money isn't taxed. So, if I'm in a 40% tax bracket or a 30% tax bracket or 20% tax bracket, that's what you're saving. So if I put $10,000 into it and I'm in a 30% tax bracket, well, then I'm going to be saving $3,000 in taxes that would normally go to the federal government. Now, let's remember the federal government's $36 trillion in debt. We're spending $1 to $2 trillion more per year than we're bringing in. So that number will obviously increase because of this plan. And I think Milton Friedman did say that your true tax burden is what the federal government spends. We have to question whether the taxes we're paying into it is really what we're paying at all, is really realistic to what our tax burden is as citizens. So we look at the 529 plan. Originally, remember the value of dollars over time invested in a market would outperform and be a incentive for people to put this money in. And what we're seeing, though, if you're putting it in now and spending it now, well, there's no time value of money, so it's not actually going to increase in value over time. And so it really is just that that amount of taxes that you would be spending. So initially, probably with this law, again, there'll probably be limited or no strings attached. But the problem is Congress changes every 2 years, presidents change every 4 years. So thinking that this is a vehicle that is going to last a long time, or be something that you can put money in now and think that it's going to be there in the future, is really fool's gold. And the other thing with 529 plans, even in investing for college, they really limit you to investing in very specific funds. And those funds aren't necessarily the best funds for you to be investing in to provide you the best rate of return. And those funds can be manipulated. So, in the past, they might say that all of those funds have to be in big companies that are implementing ESG, DEI, and these sorts of programs and have a perfect score on the Human Rights Index. Uh, you know, so you might be forced to invest in money into companies that have values that are the antithesis of yours, and so you're actually just funding those people who hate you through this 529 plan. And so for those reasons, I just don't, it is nice to be able to actually keep our money. One of the things you hear from the school choice advocates is, well, you're just getting your money back. Well, I haven't seen that on any state law. There's one that's, kind of undercover that no one likes to talk about. But Arizona, Tennessee, any of these states that have these laws, it's not been your money. It's been your neighbor's money redistributed to you. So that leads me to, let's talk about this HSLDA tax credit program. Jim Mason talked a little bit about that in episode 6. And I know people have been sending me messages, what is Classical Conversations perspective on tax credits? What's my perspective on this plan? And, I think, let me say some good things about it. Let me just give some perspective of, big picture, and talk about some, negative things about it as well. So from a positive perspective, if it is a non-refundable credit, and it is just up to what you're paying in taxes for your local school, at least we can say for a tax credit that you are getting or keeping your money and it's not going to the government. So with every single ESA or voucher, the state government has gotten stronger, it's gotten bigger, it needs to collect more taxes. So at least on tax credits, you are keeping your own money. Now, most of us will complain that the tax law is so big and so large, and it's behemoth. And I don't know what the federal government tax law is, but it's like 9,200 pages or something like that. Well, why is it so big? Well, because of tax credits and special interest carve outs. If you talk about, tax credits for EVs or tax credits for, farmers or all of these different things that are out there, we can debate whether those are good or not, but that's why we have such a big federal tax law and why states have such big tax laws is because of all these special interest carve outs. Now, I don't wanna be a special interest. I don't think that's, ideal. I think, we should treat everyone equally and, that this is a, kind of an opportunity for us to say, "Look, treat all Americans the same," because if we get our tax, carve out, then how can we talk about, the Green New Deal and them getting their tax carve outs? Like, how can we say that that's wrong, but ours is right? So on the good side, I think, it is keeping your own money. On the bad side, it creates more special interest groups, which I don't think brings us closer to liberty. Uh, you know, and, and I don't want to speak for HSLDA, but there's a litany of laws that are being like proposed in these different states, and my understanding is it's not so much that HSLDA is pushing this as like this is this is this is an option that we want to have or would love to have. It's more of a if you're going to do something to us, don't do a voucher, don't do an ESA because those are going to have strings attached with immediate consequences for homeschool liberty. If you are bound and determined to do something, then please do a tax credit instead of these other bills, not going into states and saying if you have nothing to implement this tax credit. And it also gives another idea into some legislators' minds because a lot of legislators, they're very skeptical of these ESAs and vouchers, but their donors or people who threaten to primary them are pushing it. And so they don't really have an alternative option. And so this is giving them an alternative option. So from our perspective, we're neutral. Just like anybody, we have limited time and resources. Fighting against tax credits, doing a tax credit series isn't really something that we have time and effort to do. We're going to make it clear that that's not something that we think is going to bring us towards liberty in the long run. But if someone's bound and determined to do something, then that seems to be the least bad thing that they can do. Ultimately, we'd like to see the state get out of education altogether. So, I hope that Donald Trump gets the Department of Education shut down. But that's not going to be enough. We also have to get all of these laws that the Congress has passed out as well. But then, just like the abortion fight, we need to get state governments out of education as well and bring it locally, bring it back to where it's all community run and financed like it was in the beginning. The more centralized education has gotten and the more centralized the funding of education has gotten, the worse the outcomes have become. And so the best thing we can do, for the public school system and for private school and education in general is to make it as local as possible. And that includes funding. And that's why, we don't support these big government programs. I want to turn real quickly to Tennessee. They just passed this boondoggle bill. The nice thing about this Tennessee and Texas bill is these are very muted compared to probably what they would have tried to pass 2 or 4 years ago in some ways. In other ways, they aren't. But this Tennessee bill has a significant amount of bribes in it, quite frankly, to get these legislators to pass it. Some research was done in Tennessee. This bill gives, I think, 20,000 scholarships out, as they call it. But there's only 3,000 seats available in all the private schools in Tennessee. And something like 60% of Tennessee counties don't even have a private school in them. And so we can quickly see that, somewhere around 80 to 85% of these funds are going to be going to people already paying their education bill. And at most, 3,000 of these are going to be going to new students. And we see that in these other states, somewhere between 50 and 80% of these vouchers or ESAs or whatever they're calling them are going to people already paying their own education bills. And so it's really funding two different systems. In Texas, the Texas fight is still going on. I don't know what will be the results there. It looks like they've had some momentum of getting it out of the Senate, I believe, and into the House. My suspect is this is the crown jewel for the school choice movement. A lot of these think tanks have planted their headquarters in Austin, Texas, to get this done. They've spent tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in the state of Texas to get school choice off across the line. So the best thing to do in Texas, though, is keep calling your state representatives, letting them know that you're against it, sending them our podcasts, our articles that we've written, and keeping up the good fight there as well. It's always, I'm an athlete, I'm a coach, I'm competitive. I was homeschooled, so I know I'm used to being the underdog. This fight was worth it, even though it was unlikely that our small band of brothers and sisters was going to be able to overcome the billionaire behemoths financing it. We have forced them to have a conversation, and every time we point out their logical inconsistencies, we force them to look in the mirror. One of my friends was at a school choice conference and gave me a phone call afterwards, and he basically said that I was the topic of conversation around the bar that night. And one of the school choice proponents was saying, that Robert Bortons, he just keeps embarrassing me. He called me out for my logical fallacies, and I wish he would just go away. Why can't homeschoolers just get on board? One of his colleagues from a different organization said, well, hold on here. I don't want the homeschoolers to stop fighting against this because they're making some good points. And if we're wrong and they're right, then we'll need them to rebuild our education system because we don't know that this is going to work. And hey, I appreciate that guy's perspective. And yeah, I battle these people, but I also, friends with a lot of these people, and I agree with them on a lot of other things, and I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. But let's keep this about debating ideas and not personal attacks. Of course, I've seen a lot of personal attacks against me this week. Most of them are completely ridiculous. Things like I want to trap kids in failing public schools when obviously I've dedicated my life on getting kids out of them. Things like, Robert's just fighting at school choice because he doesn't want competition. Well, clearly we could just take the money and make a whole lot more money because I could charge $7,000 to be in a classical conversations community and call it free instead of charging $700. And that extra would basically be pure profit that I can put into my pocket instead of, the $10 of profit we make per customer now or whatever it is. So it's just ridiculous statements. But I want to encourage you, keep fighting, keep the conversation going. There's more and more of us growing. Every time we bring up these logical fallacies, how they're violating the core values of conservatism, how they do not align with biblical truth, people are coming to our side. And that's why most of the time, we'll see if I can get a school choice debate. But so far, everybody's ducking me because they know it's not going to turn out pretty for them. And I just encourage you to fight the good fight. Once this legislation season is over, another legislation season has begun, and it might be time to go rhino hunting and see if we can get some of these Republicans primaried and get good conservatives in that will actually fight for education independence over dependency. Thank you so much for tuning into our school choice special, and be sure to tune in as we get back to our regularly scheduled program in the near future. God bless and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.